Can one entitled passenger derail an entire flight over a single seat? And what if the person she attacks is a decorated veteran with a secret upgrade? Let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Subscribe for more unbelievable drama. Let's get to the video. I was nearly settled into my first class seat, headphones in hand, when a piercing voice cut to the cabin, demanding to know who had the nerve to occupy her spot. She barreled down the aisle, eyes locked on me like a laser, brandishing her boarding pass and muttering about incompetent airline staff. A hush fell over the rows of seats as passengers realized a showdown was brewing, and I felt my stomach tighten, knowing all too well the chaos that could unfold from a single furious passenger. The flight attendant approached her with a polite smile, but the woman, let's call her Karen, snapped that she had a first-class ticket and wouldn't be cheated out of what she deserved. I tried to ignore her, hoping it was just a misunderstanding, but she stomped right up to my row, pointing at me, and screeched that I was in her seat. The attendant gently asked for both our boarding passes, and I handed mine over with a calm shrug, certain the mix-up would be resolved in seconds. Karen folded her arms, tapping her foot as if her time was far too precious for this, then rolled her eyes when the attendant confirmed seat 2B was indeed mine. Instead of apologizing, Karen exploded, insisting there had to be a mistake, that she always flew first class, and that I looked too young and healthy to require a premium seat. Her volume climbed, drawing the attention of every onlooker in the cabin, some already lifting their phones to record. The flight attendant apologized with confusion and asked Karen to proceed to her correct seat, but she refused, planting her feet like an immovable statue. My cheeks burned with embarrassment, not just from the spectacle, but from the personal jab she lobbed, calling me an entitled brat for not giving up my seat to someone more deserving. The murmurs from surrounding passengers turned to open commentary, a few people telling Karen to calm down so we could take off on time. She turned on them too, shouting that they had no idea what she'd been through, that she needed the extra legroom for medical reasons, though she provided no evidence beyond her own word. Sensing a stalemate, the attendant quietly conferred with the lead flight attendant, who then stepped forward, politely warning Karen that if she continued disrupting the flight, security might remove her. Undeterred, Karen lifted her chin, insisting she call the airline's corporate office, that she'd never been so disrespected, and that she had half a mind to sue. The pilot emerged from a cockpit, arms crossed, telling Karen that the flight needed to depart on schedule, and if she didn't take her assigned seat immediately, they would escort her off the plane. Her eyes flicked around for support, but the only response was a silent wave of annoyance from passengers who just wanted to get airborne. My heart hammered, knowing this was turning into a full-blown meltdown, but I also felt a pang of guilt, aware I had a specific reason for needing first class that wasn't visible at first glance. The attendant gave me a small nod as if to say, it's time, so I mustered my courage and whispered that I had a special status, a reason the airline had upgraded me. The flight attendant nodded, stepping away to speak with the pilot, leaving Karen still fuming, ranting about how she wouldn't budge. A low tension crackled through the cabin, some filming, others sighing heavily, anxious to see how this ended. At last, the flight attendant picked up the intercom, clearing his throat, announcing that the airline would like to thank a particular passenger for his service in the military, and that he was flying on a specially approved ticket for medical reasons tied to that service. A stunned silence settled over the rows, passengers glancing my way with new understanding, while Karen's jaw dropped mid-rant. A smattering of applause broke out, a few passengers murmuring thanks for my service, and I felt my cheeks heat up, unaccustomed to the spotlight. Karen sputtered, then tried to claim she'd always supported the troops, but her voice wavered, the wind clearly knocked from her sails. The pilot calmly repeated that if she refused to move now, she'd be removed, and with everyone's eyes on her, she had no choice but to stomp off down the aisle. She mumbled something about never flying this airline again, and a ripple of relief washed through the cabin as she vanished behind the curtain. The flight attendant offered me a tight smile, apologizing for the disturbance, and I nodded, feeling both gratitude and lingering discomfort at having my military status broadcast to end the standoff. The plane finally pushed back from the gate, passengers settling in, some leaning over to whisper words of appreciation for my service, others shaking their heads at Karen's meltdown. I put on my headphones, heart still pounding, but at least the chaos had been defused. As the engines roared to life, I couldn't help but wonder if Karen's outrage had truly ended, or she'd find a new way to stir up trouble even from the back of the plane. Instead of more mid-flight screaming, Karen shifts to a behind-the-scenes tactic, emailing the airline's corporate office from her seat, alleging that the protagonist's military status is a lie. The protagonist, unaware of her complaint, tries to enjoy the flight, only to discover upon landing that a corporate representative is waiting at the gate to investigate Karen's accusations. A new conflict erupts as airline management must decide whether Karen's claims hold any merit, forcing the protagonist to defend himself once more in front of airline officials, setting the stage for a post-flight confrontation. She sat in row 22, arms folded, glaring at the back of the protagonist's head while occasionally tapping furiously on her phone, as though plotting her next move. A few rows away, passengers rolled their eyes, relieved the shouting had ceased, but sensing the tension wasn't truly over. Karen composed a long-winded email to the airline's corporate office, labeling the protagonist a fraud who was falsely claiming military status just to score a first-class seat. She attached a blurry photo she'd snapped during the altercation, writing that she wanted a full investigation into this imposter. As the flight attendants passed out drinks, Karen refused to make eye contact, stewing in her seat, imagining how corporate would swoop in to vindicate her. The protagonist, meanwhile, tried to relax, though a knot of anxiety lingered in his stomach, half expecting another confrontation at any moment. Other travelers occasionally leaned over, offering hushed thanks for his service, a stark contrast to Karen's simmering resentment in the back. When the beverage cart reached Karen, she barked at the airline, owed her an apology, but the attendant merely smiled thinly and moved on. With nothing else to do, Karen stared at her phone, refreshing her email, hoping for an immediate reply from corporate that never came. The pilot announced they'd be landing soon, and a wave of relief washed through the cabin, as though everyone was counting the minutes until they could escape the tension. As the wheels touched down, Karen shot up, grabbing her phone and bag, determined to be first off the plane so she could find a manager. The protagonist remained seated, bracing for whatever trouble awaited them at the gate, suspecting Karen wasn't done. Sure enough, the moment the door opened, Karen bolted up the aisle, ignoring the flight attendant's polite request to let first class deplane first. She mumbled something about getting justice, phone gripped tightly in her hand. The protagonist stepped off a few minutes later, heart pounding as he noticed two airline representatives by the gate, scanning the crowd. Karen stood beside them, arms crossed, triumph flashing in her eyes. A hush fell among onlookers, some curious if this was a sequel to the mid-flight meltdown. One representative, wearing a strained smile, beckoned the protagonist over, explaining that Karen had lodged a serious complaint about misrepresentation of military status. Karen glared, spitting that he scammed everyone, that the pilot's announcement was based on a lie. The representative asked for any documentation proving the protagonist's service, wanting to handle the matter discreetly but forced to address Karen's allegations. Passengers who recognized the drama from first class slowed down to watch, forming a small semicircle near the gate. The protagonist swallowed hard, not accustomed to flaunting personal credentials, but realized that Karen's accusations could tarnish his reputation if left unanswered. Reaching into a side pocket, he pulled out a folded set of papers verifying his service record, along with a letter from the airline that confirmed his medically related upgrade. The representative studied them, nodding with visible relief, then turned to Karen, asking if she had any actual proof of wrongdoing. Karen sputtered, claiming the protagonist looked too fit and young to be a veteran, that he must be forging documents, but she had nothing concrete. The second airline rep, exasperated, explained that the protagonist's paperwork was legitimate and that the pilot's announcement was accurate. A small crowd applauded quietly, some shaking their heads at Karen's persistent malice. Undeterred, Karen raised her phone, insisting she had emailed corporate, that an investigation was pending. The reps exchanged glances, confirming they'd seen her email, but found no basis for immediate action. Karen tried to escalate, threatening to sue the airline for enabling a con artist, but the reps calmly stated that if she continued harassing protagonists, she could be banned from future flights. A few passengers murmured their support for the protagonist, one older gentleman stepping forward to vouch for him, having overheard his quiet conversations with the flight attendant about a past deployment. Karen's face blanched, confronted by public consensus that she was in the wrong, yet she refused to concede. The airline reps asked if the protagonist wished to press a harassment complaint, but he shook his head, just wanting to leave in peace. At that moment, a senior pilot passing by recognized the protagonist, saluted him with a quick thanks, inadvertently confirming his authenticity for all to see. Karen's mouth dropped open, her final hope of discrediting him shattered. The reps advised her to step aside, letting the protagonist go about his day, but she stood there, phone trembling, muttering that she'd take this to social media. With a weary sigh, the protagonist walked away, ignoring Karen's last barbs about exposing the truth. The small crowd dispersed, some offering words of support, others shaking their heads at how quickly entitlement had turned into a baseless crusade. Karen tried filming an outro for her live feed, stammering that the airline was covering up a scandal, but her phone's battery died mid-rant, leaving her silent for once. The airline reps apologized to the protagonist for the inconvenience, promising they'd handle any follow-up. He thanked them, quietly gathering his belongings, grateful that the confrontation ended without further escalation. Though relieved, he sensed Karen wasn't done, that she'd likely double down on social media or find a new angle to stir up trouble. Mid-flight, Karen secretly contacted the airline's corporate office, claiming the protagonist's military status was a sham and demanding he be penalized. Upon landing, airline representatives investigated her complaint, only to validate the protagonist's legitimate credentials, leaving Karen humiliated. Though she retreated from the immediate confrontation, her simmering anger suggested she would not let the matter drop, setting the stage for an even more public showdown. How Key Point 3 introduces fresh developments, no repeat tactics. Rather than confronting airline staff again, Karen launches a social media smear campaign, posting videos and so-called evidence that the protagonist stages military status. The protagonist tries to ignore her, but local media catches wind of the viral story, pressuring him to decide if he should speak publicly. Tensions escalate when Karen plans a public expose event, hoping to rally supporters and force the protagonist into a corner, turning her personal vendetta into a community spectacle. She fumed all the way through baggage claim, phone glued to her hand, typing up a storm of accusations for her social media feed, where she labeled the protagonist a con artist who exploited the troops' card to swindle a first-class seat. Within hours, her rant began circulating in local Facebook groups and on a handful of small-time gossip blogs, each retelling the story with Karen's biased spin. She posted a shaky video from the airport curb, eyes red from anger, explaining how the airline covered up the protagonist's fake service record. Meanwhile, the protagonist tried to leave quietly, ignoring the stares of a few curious bystanders who recognized him from a flight fiasco. Karen spotted him from across the terminal, whipped out her phone again, and followed him at a distance, filming every step he took, presumably to catch him slipping up. He quickly hopped into a rideshare car, heart pounding at the thought of how this drama was already ballooning beyond the plane. By the time he got home, his phone buzzed with messages from friends, linking him to Karen's viral posts. Some were half laughing. Some were genuinely concerned, all amazed by the speed at which her story was spreading. Karen, emboldened by the initial wave of attention, continued uploading videos, each more dramatic than the last, proclaiming she had inside sources confirming the protagonist was never in the military. Her followers, a mix of gullible supporters and trolls, egg her on, demanding justice for Karen's stolen seat. In response, the airline posted a short statement reaffirming they stand by their passenger credentials, but did little to quell the online speculation. The protagonist wrestled with whether to respond or keep silent,